Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2018 Hack Summit. I welcome all of you to this fantastic event where we'll be spending the next 3 days learning about blockchain. And I'm thrilled to say that we have over 157 countries participating today from all over the world, all walks of life, all socioeconomic statuses, all genders. It's going to be a fantastic conglomeration of blockchain education for the world everywhere. And so my name's Ed Roman. I'll be your host for the next 3 days. And we have an incredible list of speakers lined up who have volunteered their time generously to teach us all about blockchain. I'll be going for the next 30 minutes giving you a quick introduction to what this event is all about. And then we're going to launch right into our first session, which is with Jed McCaleb, who is the co-founder of both Stellar, Ripple, as well as Mt. Gox. So it's going to be a fantastic event with Jed. And so let me give you a quick introduction to Hack Summit and what it's all about, a little bit of history behind Hack Summit. And then we're going to be learning all about you and asking you some questions in the audience. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so you can see my presentation. And let's do this. So welcome to Hack Summit. What is Hack Summit? Hack Summit is a virtual conference for the blockchain. And it's technical, so we target a technical engineering audience. So this is going to be hardcore technical education for engineers in the audience who want to learn about blockchain. And so we expect that the audience members are folks who have maybe built software in the past. Hopefully many of you are engineers in the audience. This isn't going to be just a fluffy conference with a bunch of business stuff. It's going to be actual learnings and education, as well as insights and knowledge about what are some of the new important blockchain projects coming out that you should be aware of. It's 3 days long. We run roughly from 9 a.m. Pacific till roughly 5 p.m. Pacific each day. And we have 27 incredible speakers from all over the world. We have over 18,000 registrations, and I actually wrote that last night. We're now at over 20,000 registrations, which makes this officially the largest blockchain event ever held. And I'm proud to say that we've accomplished this together. And we hold this event every 2 years. So the first time we held this event was in the year 2014. We held it again in 2016, and now this is the 2018 event. And the previous year's events were more general purpose focused. So they were on software education that is not blockchain specific, but just general purpose developer education. And we decided this year that we're going to have it be a blockchain event because blockchain is such a timely topic and we see it as an important part of our future in the software development industry. And so this year is all about blockchain. And what's unique about this event is that we support great charities. So all the proceeds from this event go to these important nonprofits. So we're fundraising for Women Who Code, Black Girls Code, Girls Who Code, Free Code Camp, Coder Dojo, Bridge Foundry, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We want to thank all of our charities for getting involved with us and helping us with this event. That's what's unique about this event is that we're not seeking to profit off this event. Your contributions are going directly to the charities, 100% of them. We also have a virtual hackathon. And the virtual hackathon has happened the weekend prior to Hack Summit. So the hackathon occurred on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this past weekend. And we had over 1,200 folks in our Slack channel who were battling it out, building code on the blockchain, learning cool stuff. And the judging is occurring for those projects as we speak. And so we've assembled an all-star list of judges who will be joining us at the conclusion of Hack Summit. So at the end session on day 3, we're actually going to be having an award ceremony where you can see some of the cool projects that people built over this past weekend. And you'll actually get to see what is actually possible to do in a weekend if you set your mind to it. And so it was a lot of fun. And those who participated are able to win prizes from over $150,000 worth of cash as well as tokens that were given away as part of the virtual hackathon. And so the way that worked is that we had sponsors for the hackathon. The sponsors are generally blockchain foundations that wanted to have developers build projects on their technologies. And they were generous enough to contribute their tokens as well as dollars to give to the participants. We also gave away some Ethereum as well. And on top of that, the sponsors were generous enough to donate to charity as well. So even the sponsors for the hackathon have helped these important causes. So we're really grateful to the sponsors and for the participants in the hackathon. So why are we doing a virtual conference and why are we doing it right now? That's kind of an important question to kind of get grounded on for Hack Summit. So, when we first started this event in 2014, we looked around the world and tried to figure out what are the reasons why virtual events have not succeeded in the past. What has failed about virtual events? Because we were very curious because we saw that other industries were being disrupted by the internet, but for some reason, conferences were not being disrupted. Conferences still existed in large scale in the real world, and virtual events were kind of hokey. And so when we looked at this, what we learned was that at the beginning, the first attempts at virtual events were largely based on 3D avatars and folks who are actually kind of pretending to be in a virtual world. So when we saw this and we looked at this, we realized that these 3D avatars and this kind of virtual world was not really what you want to be doing on a virtual event. Because when was the last time that you actually went online, went to a website, and consumed information by actually going to a 3D exhibit booth? That is not how we browse websites in the real world. And so we thought that it was kind of nonsensical to actually have virtual events that involve 3D avatars and silly things like that. So instead what we did was we decided to incubate a startup company that was called Crowdcast. And we worked with the founder of this company, which is a fellow named Sai Hussain. And Sai was generous enough to donate his platform and his technology to help us with the event. And he created a reimagined online experience. And so Crowdcast is basically a way to perform video chat, audience polling, as well as democratized questions for speakers. So I'm getting some reports that my slides are not advancing. Let me correct that for you guys real quick so that we can actually see the PowerPoint. Hopefully you can see it now. Audience, let me know if you can see my PowerPoint right now. Give me a thumbs up if you can. So what's interesting about Crowdcast is that Crowdcast is a technology where you can have a reimagined online experience. So with Crowdcast, if you see on the bottom of your screen, thank you audience, that's very helpful. On the bottom of your screen, you can see that there's a bunch of controls for you where you can actually interact with me and I can interact with you. So for example, I can poll you, I can ask you questions. You'll see on the bottom, there's a button there called polls. If you haven't answered those polls already, go ahead and answer them. I'm asking you a bunch of questions which we'll review later, such as do you own tokens? Are you an engineer? Have you built blockchain products in the past? Things like that. And so go ahead and answer those questions. We'll talk about those answers later. And this is something that's really cool that we can do with a virtual event that we haven't been able to do in the past with physical events. Because with a physical event, it's not very easy to poll the audience in real time and ask them questions. But then also you can ask me questions and you can ask the speakers questions. And then at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's an ask a question button. So feel free to ask any questions that you see and we'll do our best to answer them. What's really cool about asking questions is that the audience can actually in a democratized way upvote each other's questions. So it's not just the bravest audience members whose questions get answered or the ones that the speaker happens to call on. It's the actual best questions as voted by other audience members. So there's actually some blockchain kind of voting themes going on here, even for how we're answering questions. And so we think that's a really cool feature of Crowdcast, and we're very lucky to work with them. A lot of other crypto projects are using Crowdcast right now for their events, and we suggest that you may want to explore that for your own projects. In addition to that, you can chat with other audience members here on the right-hand side, and so feel free to make new friends and chat with people. I encourage that as part of this event. So let's compare a traditional conference to Hack Summit and how it's different. So a traditional conference, you may have been to a traditional conference recently. For example, there's one that I won't mention the name, but I'm sure you know what it is. It happened this past summer. It was a big blockchain event that happened in New York City. From what I heard, it was a mad show, charging $2,000 a ticket. So a traditional conference is centralized like that. They're intended to make profits for the centralized stewards who are running those conferences. They're rent-seeking in that regard. And they require that you travel to the event. The speakers are pretty good, but because the speakers have to travel, not all the speakers can make it to the event. And it's hard to leave the event if you're not enjoying it. So at Hack Summit, we've kind of disrupted on all those fronts. So you can just tune in from whenever you want. If you're bored, you can leave at any time. There's no travel required. It's decentralized. It's not for profit. And we've got great speakers because the speakers don't have to travel. So here's a little bit about me. So I'm the founder of Hack Summit. I full-time run a venture capital firm called Hack VC. And Hack VC is an investor in blockchain startups. And we also invest in normal startups as well. And in the past, I used to be a developer back in the day. So I wrote a book on enterprise Java beans a long time ago. This is an ancient technology. It's no longer applicable today. Back in the day, it was kind of important, but it got obsolete very, very quickly. And I created the world's largest Java developer community called the serverside.com. So that's a little bit about me. I've also created a couple of other startups too. So you can kind of think of me as kind of half business, half technical. And I'll do my best to be your moderator for this event. We also have a great team joining us for Hack Summit. Geraldo Ramos, Alan Hasu, Sinju Chuang, and Pranay Mohan. These guys are all volunteers who have helped us and volunteered their time for free to make Hack Summit work today for everyone. We've also got a number of partners who are joined with us today to hold hands and create Hack Summit. Many of these are blockchain foundations. I also want to create a special shout out to a couple of the partners who have promoted us. For example, we've got TopTal, where you can find some of the best engineers in the world. We also have Top Coder, which is also a market where you can find incredible engineers for projects. We also have Hired.com, where you can find a job, at your dream job as an engineer, and many others. And I want to give a special thanks to Pluralsight. So Pluralsight was the original corporate steward for Hack Summit, and they have generously given us back the event to run independently. And Pluralsight is democratizing technology education, so we're very grateful and thankful for Pluralsight. Now, if you're looking for a job, we can also help you for that at Hack Summit. We are going to be sending out newsletters after the event if you opted in to finding your dream job. And so hopefully we can help you to find a career through Hack Summit. This is an experiment, and we'll see how it goes. We're doing it for the first year this time. And then finally, if you get value out of any of the sessions at Hack Summit, you can feel free to donate. There's a donate button at the bottom of the window that you're in right now. We accept cryptocurrency as well as US dollars. We did that as a new thing for this year. So we hope that you donate if you find value at Hack Summit. And so now finally what I'd like to do is give you a quick preview of the event and tell you about some of the sessions that I'm excited about, as well as go over some of the big challenges that are happening right now in blockchain and how our speakers are going to be addressing those challenges. So let's go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And okay. Let's talk about some of the big things that are happening going forward in blockchain. So the first question to ask is blockchain hype versus reality? So let's look at what the audience said about this. So we polled the audience today, and we asked a number of questions for the audience. The last question that we asked at the end of this poll was, what do you think about the future of blockchain? Is it a fad? Is it here to stay? Or are you not sure yet? And overwhelmingly, the audience seems to have believed that that blockchain is actually here to stay. We have 557 votes that blockchain is here and is a permanent facet of our world going forward as software developers. And there's a bunch of folks who think that they're not sure yet where blockchain is headed. So here's kind of my perspective on this. So the Gartner Group has a pretty interesting take on this. They have this thing called an innovation cycle that they track, where there's an innovation trigger that happens, which happened when Bitcoin was created. And then there's this thing called the peak of inflated expectations. And I think we entered the peak of inflated expectations this past Christmas when Bitcoin hit almost $20,000 per Bitcoin. And there's just a wave of investor interest into blockchain. And then after that, there's been a little bit of a pullback of the market where the price of cryptocurrencies have kind of had a little bit of a recession. And that's kind of called the trough of disillusionment, where we're starting to think, oh, is this for real? And there's a lot of questions right now in the community about that. And this is, my take on this is that this is a very normal phenomenon that occurs with new technologies that get released, because eventually there's this upwards trend that's called the slope of enlightenment, which eventually ends in the plateau of productivity, where we're actually using this technology in real world applications. So I do believe that blockchain is here to stay. It's not just hype. It's not just an investment that's crazy. And I think you'll start to see that over the coming years. But I think there was a little bit too much of an inflated expectation that may have led to folks criticizing the blockchain today. And I think that's unwarranted. So let's talk about some of the topics that are going to be talked about later this week at Hack Summit. So the first topic, the most overwhelming topic that we're going to be discussing, is the topic of scalability. So scalability has been a challenge for blockchain over the last year or two. Ethereum, for example, scales to roughly 15 transactions per second. Bitcoin scales from between 3.3 and 7 transactions per second, depending upon how you look at it. And so, one of the questions that the world has right now is, can blockchain networks scale? And there's a bunch of solutions for that are being proposed that folks are actually going to be talking about at Hack Summit this week. And that's going to be a core focus at Hack Summit. So I'm going to create a poll right now for the audience, which is, have you ever worked on a blockchain project that has had scale? And I'm guessing that most people are saying no. You should see that in the poll right now. Because blockchain is so new, a lot of you may not have actually worked on blockchain projects yet, because it's such a new technology. And so I think over time you'll start to see that more and more folks will actually have scalability issues with blockchain. And the solutions for that are being proposed, many of those speakers are going to be here with us this week. So for example, in the Ethereum ecosystem, there's solutions like sharding, like off-chain transactions that are similar to the Lightning Network, ZK Snarks, ZK Starks. These are all technologies to help scale the Ethereum ecosystem. In the Bitcoin ecosystem, you've got the Lightning Network. And then you've got new entrants that are helping to solve scalability challenges who will be here this week with us at Hack Summit. So you've got speakers from Definity, from Thunder Token, from Cadena, Starkware, Hashgraph, Oasis Labs, O1 Labs, Scale Labs, and more. And so this is going to be a year of scalability, where we're going to see many, many attempts at making the blockchain work at scale. And there's going to be multiple winners in this space, because there are very different trade-offs when you build blockchains for scalability. So let's look at what the audience has said here. So we've got about a 10-to-1 ratio, where about 1/10 of the audience have actually worked on a blockchain project that has had scalability challenges. So that's actually pretty impressive. I didn't think that that ratio would be so high, given that blockchain is so new. So let's talk about next, exchanges. That's the next big topic at Hack Summit. So today, if you were to acquire tokens, you would need to go to a centralized exchange, a place like Binance.com or the Kraken exchange. And if you want to use a blockchain utility, like for example, something like Filecoin or another utility service on the blockchain, if you were to do that today, assuming it would exist, it would be a pretty terrible user experience, because you would have to go to a centralized exchange to acquire those tokens, or you'd have to buy those tokens from a third party. By interacting with that exchange and by storing the tokens in the exchange, you're risking your tokens getting hacked or losing the tokens. And the centralized exchanges control the token releases. They control the ICOs, and they sometimes charge exorbitant fees for that. And so if you kind of compare this to the user experience of using a normal product, like for example, using Uber, you load up Uber, you connect to Facebook, you upload your credit card information, and you're done. You don't need to go to a separate service, a centralized exchange, to use Uber. And so in the future, what you're going to start to see is decentralized exchanges, where you can actually, in a transparent way, through APIs on the back end, use services without actually having to go to a third party. And so I'm going to ask the audience a couple questions here about centralized exchanges. So first question is, have you ever bought tokens using a centralized exchange? I see a little bit of a lag on the video compared to the polls. That's normal, by the way, just because of the back-end infrastructure. So if you're experiencing that, it's no big deal. It's quite normal. And then I'm going to ask another question. This is a little bit more interesting here, which is, off money via a centralized exchange hack. And I don't think very many people have, but in case you have, I'd be curious to see if any of you have. I personally have not lost money through a hack of a decentralized exchange, but I actually did have some Dogecoin back in the day that I kept on an exchange, and the exchange went out of business, and I lost my tokens that way. So we are getting some responses here. It looks like folks have lost money through a centralized exchange hack. And it looks like about a little bit less than half the audience has actually acquired tokens using centralized exchanges. So very interesting. And so the solutions for this that we're going to be presenting at Hack Summit in these decentralized exchanges, we have 2 representatives from decentralized exchanges that will be presenting at Hack Summit, and it'll be occurring later today. And those are folks from Radar Relay as well as the Ocean. And there's other decentralized exchange attempts as well, such as StellarX and AirSwap, as well as Binance.com has a new decentralized initiative. And these folks are going to be duking it out to create a better user experience through transparent exchanges of tokens. And so we'll see how that plays out over the next few years. And you'll learn all about that later today at the Decentralized Exchange panel. The next concern that comes up with blockchain is this concept called token velocity. So what is token velocity? Token velocity is the idea that as you start to use a blockchain network more and more, and as you start to use the tokens more and more, for example, through decentralized exchanges that make it easy for you to use tokens in a frictionless way, the tokens are going to be used more and more quickly, which means you may not need to hold the tokens for a long period of time. And if you're not holding tokens for a long period of time, then you might not need as many of those tokens to be used to operate a service. Because as soon as you acquire the token is spent and available for someone else to use, rather than being held in an account for a long period of time. That's the concept of velocity. So there's a theory right here that as these blockchain networks start to get used more and more, and as decentralized exchanges cause transparent exchanges of these tokens, that you may not need to hold these tokens for as long, which means that there's fewer tokens needed to run the market network. And so this is a real threat to the blockchain, to specifically tokens that are relying on appreciation based on supply and demand of those tokens. You could think about it like any network, many of those tokens, and will those tokens be valuable someday? And so I'm going to ask the audience a question, which is, are you worried about token velocity as a potential threat to the value of your token holdings if you do own tokens? And I will ask you that question now. And while we are waiting for the audience to answer that question, we're going to talk about some potential solutions for this. So there's one strategy to solve for this, is what's called a burn and mint strategy, where you're burning some of your tokens and minting new tokens to control the velocity. You can also gamify the holding of tokens, and you can also reward staking of tokens to folks who will hold the tokens for a long period of time. And so we're going to ask the foundations who present this week at Hack Summit how they think about token velocity, and whether that's a concern that they think about in terms of how they architect their token economics, because it can impact us significantly as token holders. And so it looks like the majority of the audience is worried about token velocity. We've got 126 votes right now for token velocity saying yes. And so this is going to be a significant issue that we're going to be talking about this week at Hack Summit. The next concern to talk about is privacy. So most of the world's wealth is private today. If you think about it, most of us are not going around telling each other what our bank account balances are. We value our privacy. And on the blockchain today, things aren't truly that private. You can actually demask the blockchain and demask the anonymity through companies such as Chainalysis. And so there's initiatives going on to help identify who's who on the blockchain. And the data within smart contracts by default is not private by default either. And so privacy is a big issue for blockchain. And if you think about it, if you're a large enterprise and you're thinking about embracing the blockchain and using the blockchain, the data that occurs on the blockchain needs to be private to your enterprise. If you think about it, what large enterprise will take their SQL database and put all that out there for public consumption on the blockchain? It's just not going to happen. And so there's some other use cases for privacy as well, such as government surveillance, censorship, things like that. In some countries, the government will be spying on their citizens, and so privacy is an important topic there as well. And so we'll ask the audience a couple of questions about privacy. The first question I'll ask the audience is, a large enterprise cares about privacy? What's that mean? And then the second question I'll ask is your enterprise thinking about or exploring or piloting the blockchain? And I'll give you a multiple choice answer here. Some of you might not work for an enterprise. So we'll say, I don't work for an enterprise is one of the options here. The second option will be, we are not using the blockchain at all. Third will be, we're thinking about the blockchain. And the fourth will be, we're piloting the blockchain. And then for those of you who just aren't in the, don't. And so I'd love to hear from you about, are your enterprises thinking about or embracing the blockchain? Then the last question I'll ask, region that has surveillance or censorship. So are you living in a part of the country where the government is intrusive in terms of your privacy? And could blockchain be a potential solution for you? So let's start to review some of the answers as they're coming in real time here. So the first question, do you work at a large enterprise that cares about data privacy? Most folks are voting yes for that. They do. So that's very good to hear. And then, is your enterprise starting to think about exploring or piloting the blockchain? So most folks here do not work for enterprises. That'll be about 34% of the audience. The next most popular answer is we are not considering using the blockchain. So it's a little bit early for those enterprises to be embracing the blockchain. And then it looks like about 20% of folks are thinking about using the blockchain. And this is, I think, pretty expected given that enterprises are conservative in general about how they embrace technologies like the blockchain. And then there's a very brave 11% of the audience who's actually piloting the blockchain right now. So that's pretty cool to hear that almost 1 out of 9 out of our attendees are actually piloting the blockchain as we speak at their enterprise. So what are some of the solutions for privacy that we're going to be talking about at Hack Summit? So later today, in our third session, we're going to have Brian Fox, who is the co-founder of the Orchid Protocol. And the Orchid Protocol is a privacy solution that will help with things like government surveillance, control, and censorship. We're also going to be hearing later from Cadena, as well as the Keep Network, NewCipher, and Tari. And each of those projects are focused on privacy. And so we've got 5 sessions at Hack Summit. I encourage you to attend them if you want to learn about privacy. The next thing we'll talk about here is blockchain usability. So blockchain today, one of the biggest problems with blockchain is that the average developer out there has to learn a new programming language like Solidity in order to embrace the blockchain. And there isn't a really big, robust set of ecosystems of IDEs and debuggers and things like that to help you get going. It's just getting started because it's a new industry. And the documentation is a little bit sparse today. It's bleeding edge. And so, so this is one of those things where over time it'll be solved, but it'll take time to get there. And so usability of the blockchain, I believe, is a fundamental challenge in front of us as developers as we start to use the blockchain. And so I'm going to ask you a question here about what's important to you if you're embracing a blockchain as a developer. So what is the #1 most important factor for you if you were to pick a blockchain? The blockchain is documented? Is it that the blockchain is secure, that it's scalable? There's probably going to be a bunch of you, all of these are important. And you're right, all of them are important. A way to ask a question in Crowdcast that allow you to give them multiple answers. So we're just going to ask you one simple question, which is, what is the #1 most important when you're choosing a blockchain? So you got to just pick one, even though everything is important. You just got to pick one, and we'll see how the results come in. So we're going to be talking to several speakers about this, in particular Parity, which is Jutta Steinberg's company. So Jutta Steiner is one of the technical leaders within the Ethereum ecosystem, who's created a more simple way to use Ethereum using Parity. We're also going to be looking at technologies like Clover with a Y.io. And there's another hosting solution called Blockdaemon that allows you to essentially have Heroku for the blockchain, where you can host your technology without having to deal with the DevOps that's underlying. And so as you start to see this ecosystem evolve, you'll start to see more and more vendors like this that you'll be able to tap into. And so we're looking at the real-time results from the audience right now, and it looks like the #1 most important feature that people look for is security. And then #2 is a tie between well-documented blockchains as well as a vibrant ecosystem surrounding the blockchain. And so for those of you who care about the vibrant ecosystem, Ethereum right now has the lead in that regard. They have the largest ecosystem. And we'll see how long that lasts. There's a bunch of contenders now who are going to be entering this kind of the race for the layer 2, which is the smart contract revolution. And there's going to be a bunch of attempts at making more easy to use ecosystems. And we'll see how that plays out over the next few years. A few other topics that we're going to be talking about. One is the idea of crypto collectibles. So crypto collectible is a new type of asset that has been created thanks to the blockchain. The example of this that most people point to is CryptoKitties. So CryptoKitties is a website that you can go to where you can buy a virtual cat, and the virtual cat is a game that you can play where you can breed cats with other cats. And what's interesting about the CryptoKitties is that this is a way for you to actually invest in a crypto collectible while also playing a game at the same time. So it's almost like an amalgamation of a game as well as an investment at the same time. And you control this thing. It's tradable. You own it. You can sell it to other people. It's on the public, immutable ledger, so you know that it's yours. Even if CryptoKitties goes out of business, you still own your CryptoKitty. And what's interesting is that CryptoKitties actually brought Ethereum to its knees in late 2017. This one little game was responsible for about, depending on how you account for it, between 10 and 20% of all Ethereum traffic was through this game called CryptoKitties. And so one question we're going to be asking is it a fad? Is it here to stay? Is crypto collectibles going to become a big thing for us? And there's a bunch of startups that are now creating next generation crypto collectibles as well. And so we're going to have a special session later today just on crypto. A lot of fun, Pacific time today. And so if you want to learn about some of the other types of crypto gaming, that'll be here for you to learn. And then we're also going to have a co-founder of CryptoKitties speaking here later today as well. So I'm going to ask you a question, audience, which is, do you or have you ever owned a CryptoKitty? And then I'm also going to ask you a more broad question, which is, have you any virtual? So virtual property could be, for example, you purchased a skin in Overwatch, for example. That would be an example of virtual property. So I'm expecting that a lot more people have our own virtual property than CryptoKitties, just because the space is more broad. But surprisingly, we actually have quite a few people who actually do own CryptoKitties. We have about 10% of the audience so far who have voted in for that. And most people in the audience do own virtual property. So very cool to hear. The next topic we're going to be talking about is identity management. So identity management today is kind of a hassle. You store your identity in silos. You got passwords. You store passwords in databases. Sometimes you store hashes of passwords in databases for extra security. But it's kind of a poor user experience. You have to remember all these passwords. It's arduous to remember them all. It's easy to compromise the password. And you've got driver's licenses. You've got passports, things like that. So there's a theory that using the blockchain, you can help solve for identity using the blockchain. And so this is a very, very valuable blockchain that, if it takes off and works out well, for our lives. So before we talk about potential solutions for identity on the blockchain, I'm going to ask the audience a question about how you manage your identity today. So the question for you, what's it, and be honest, and your identity passwords, like a plain text password file. Some of you who are more advanced might use something like PGP or a solution. Well, I'm going to ask you guys this now, and just be totally honest. Even if you're embarrassed about the answer, it's no big deal. I'd love to get real data from you and from each other about what we're using today. And so while the audience questions come back, we're going to talk about some solutions for this. So on the blockchain, there's this idea of what's called self-sovereign identity. So self-sovereign identity is the idea where you control your own identity on the blockchain, and you have a variety of these things called claims, which are proofs of your identity, such as your driver's license, your passport, things like this. And as long as you keep your private key under lock and key, you can use your blockchain identity essentially as your official identity. Now, the obvious question then becomes, what happens if you lose your private key or that becomes compromised? Well, there's solutions for that as well. For example, you could list a bunch of friends that you can call up who, if they all agree, can retrieve your private identity. And so by using your social network, you can retrieve your identity on the blockchain. And so there's a number of solutions for this that are being proposed and are coming out over the next year or two. One of them is Uport, which is an Ethereum project. Another is Evernym, which is a new type of blockchain specifically focused on identity. That's Evernym with a Y. And then we also have one presenter at Hack Summit will be presenting at the end of this week, which is called the FOAM protocol, F-O-A-M. And they have a technology which is called proof of location, where you can prove where you are in the world using their technology. And that can be part of your identity verification. So that's going to be a lot of fun to learn about them. So let's look at the audience questions. So I'm so happy that you guys are being honest with us about your identity. The overwhelming majority of the audience uses a handful of passwords, between 3 and 10 passwords, that they repeat on various websites. And that's, to be honest, that's what I do as well. And it's not very secure, and I'm embarrassed to say that I do that. And so hopefully these blockchain identity solutions will help all of us in a more practical way to manage our identities better and to have less identity theft. So there's a few other topics we're going to be talking about, and just to give you a quick overview of them, we have a stealth mode company called Ncent, which is going to have their first public appearance at Hack Summit, and we're going to be having an interview with the founder of Incent and hearing about his vision. This is going to be a privilege for us to hear about this. No one's heard of this before, and it's an incredible opportunity for you to learn from a brand new attempt at democratizing the idea of incentives on the blockchain, and that's basically what Incent is all about. Another important tech topic we're going to be talking about is defensibility of blockchain. So, we're spending all this time building these blockchain projects. They're all open source. They're all free. Can't someone else just steal our intellectual property? Can't someone else just clone that open source repository, fork it, and then kind of commandeer our community? That's going to be a topic that we ask our speakers about. And then we'll also have an investor panel later today where the investors are going to be telling us what they look for when they invest in a blockchain project. And that's going to be important in case any of you in the audience are engineers and are entrepreneurs and are looking to build your next company. And so that's basically a quick overview. And so now we're basically at this point with the blockchain, we're now ready to now go to our first speaker, who's Jed McCaleb, who's the creator of Mt. Gox, as well as the co-creator of Ripple, as well as Stellar, and he has a new startup called Lightyear. And so we're going to talk to Jed now, and just tune in just a minute here, and we're going to bring you all into that session. So I'm looking forward to having you all join us, and I hope you guys have a fantastic week at Hack Summit. I want to thank you again for joining us this week. We can't do it without you, and so hopefully we'll all learn together and have a great time together. So I'll see you in just a second.